Before we begin, I suggest that you pause this video, make a very careful note of the problem statement and the figure, or take a screenshot. Namaskar, this is the physicist. This is a sample problem for the International Physics Olympiad. This question has been revolving on the internet for quite some time, and a student of mine came up with this question, and I tried to solve this particular problem without using any kind of approximations. This question basically has given some approximation hints here. This is basically the hint for approximation. So if you use approximation, you will be able to solve this question analytically. Well, that is not basically an analytic solution, but again, you can work out the end result, end expression. But then if you, when I tried to solve this, I used a very general method. But then I obtained the final answer in an expression which is a double integral, which cannot be solved analytically. But then if you restrict the parameters of this problem to specific numbers, you will be able to get precise result by using computations on either Mathematica or MATLAB. That is one thing. And again, I'm going to solve this problem in both ways. First, we'll use the approximation method. Second, we'll use the general method, in which the expression that I'll eventually get to, I'll tell you that how you can actually verify that both the methods are actually giving the right exact answer. But then in the general expression, you will have to use all the approximational conditions, all the conditions, so that you can reduce down to the approximate answer. Okay. The general solution is for any sort of situation. You don't have to use any sort of approximation in there. But then I will show, I'll also at the end of the video, I'll try to attach the screenshots from Wolfram that I used for the computation by restricting the parameters to certain conditions. So if you use the same conditions on this particular method, which is approximate, as well as if you use the same conditions on the general expression that I'm going to show you in the next part, you will be able to see that both the methods are giving you the precise answer with very less difference. Okay, so first of all, let's get started. What does the question say? That this is a disk which is revolving with constant omega on a floor. Let's just assume that this board is the floor. Basically, this is the horizontal floor. Let us just say that, and this is mopping the floor. That means it's basically rotationally sliding over the floor. Okay, and since the floor is giving a constant coefficient mu, that's the floor friction coefficient, that makes it obvious that there is something which is providing the torque necessary for the disk to keep revolving with constant omega. Otherwise, the disk would not be able to move with constant omega. So that being the case, the problem is asking you to find out the force that you need to apply on this disk so that it also translates with a constant velocity v. Now the clue that we already have the mass m, okay, and radius r, that's given. The condition that the problem specifies that omega r is much greater than v. So what does that mean? It means that, just imagine, before I explain that, let us just imagine, let's just appeal to our physics, the intuition that we have for physics. Okay, have you ever seen anything sliding on the floor? For example, let's say we use washing machines. Okay, this is basically, I've simplified this problem statement from exactly a washing machine question. The problem was originally based on a washing machine. The washing machine was mopping the floor, and It was at rest, but it was revolving with constant omega. Now, any such object, for example, if you have the disk, let me just give you the example. If the same disk is here and it is moving with constant omega, if you have to move this with constant omega on the floor, which offers friction coefficient mu, in that case, the power or the torque that you need to constantly give it would be exactly equal to the torque that the friction force F, small f, offers to this particular disk. Okay. Now it says the uniform mass distribution is there, and everywhere there is uniform coefficient mu. That means at any small point, if you take on the disk which is in contact with the floor, that is moving with some sort of instantaneous velocity. Of course, this point will be revolving around the center, okay, and its velocity of this particular point, or tangential velocity, if you say that Vt, will always be equal to omega times r, where r is its radial distance from the center, omega being the angular velocity. Okay. But then this particular point is moving with Vt. That means it's already sliding on the floor. That means whatever friction is there, it is already at this particular point, that is already at its maximum possible value, which is F max. If you do not understand some of these concepts involving friction, I suggest that you watch my earlier video, which is a refresher on friction for undergraduates. I'll also mention the link of that video here. But then if you understand about friction, you will know that once the sliding happens, friction always works at its maximum, F max, which is, if this particular disk, let's say that it is not rotating, it is not at all rotating. Okay, just imagine that this disk is not rotating. Okay, I'm just taking the disk as like this. The mass m is there, radius r is there. Okay, so if it is not rotating at all, what happens is that if you have to push it so that it moves in this direction with velocity v, let us call it a minus x. So we'll use the coordinate system like this. This is the x-axis and this is the y-axis. So basically it is moving in minus x. If we have to move this, how much force do you have to apply? The force would be mu times n, again the normal reaction that the ground offers or the floor offers to this disk. What will be the normal reaction? The normal reaction again is whatever is the gravity of this disk. Okay, the question in this question, there is no mention of any additional force that we have to, that is being applied vertically downward to keep the disk pressed to the floor. So we will ignore any such force, any such additional vertical force. We'll just assume that the disk is basically the only friction, that the friction works only because of the mass of or the weight of the disk. Okay, that means if in the absence of any other vertical force, vertical, when I say vertical, that means it's either coming out of the board or getting into the board. So in the absence of any such force, what happens is normal reaction is exactly equal to the weight of the disk. Okay, so that is the amount of force that you have to apply. That is the amount of force that you have to apply to move this disk in this particular direction with a constant velocity v. Okay, so because if you apply a force higher than this, then the disk would start to accelerate. We don't need acceleration. It is basically moving with a constant velocity. Now, whatever the case may be, okay, what if the disk rotates with omega, constant omega? In that case, if you have to push the disk so that it moves with a constant translational velocity in the negative x direction, okay, in that case, would the value of the force F be higher than mu mg, or would it be less than mu mg? Just imagine that there is a mop. Okay, there is a circular disc shaped mop on the floor. If you just have to push the mop on the ground itself, okay, translationally, I think you will have to, I know of course, just think about it. Try to do some sort of experiments. Okay, try to hold some any heavy object in any shape on the ground and try to slide it on the ground, and then just feel the amount of force that you have to apply. Okay, in the next step, just try to rotate that particular object that you're holding. Rotate it with in any direction, counterclockwise or in clockwise sense, but while you are rotating it, at the same time try to push it forward in any direction translationally. In that case, you will observe that the force that you have to apply to move it translationally in any direction would be much less than the amount of force that you have to offer or to apply when that object is not at all rotating. Okay, so why is that? Okay, this problem basically makes that fundamental concept very clear. Okay, so now we have discussed the basics. What does this approximation, why do we need this particular approximation, which is omega r is much greater than v? That is one of the key things that we have to use, okay, to solve the problem. Now first, just let us just ignore that the v is not there. Okay, it is just revolving with omega. Okay, if it is just moving with omega, any at a distance r from the center, any point you take, okay, that will have a tangential velocity vt, that is going to be omega times r. Okay, so as you take this point radially outward, the tangential velocity will keep increasing and will be the maximum when it is at the periphery. Okay, in that case the vt here, omega times capital R. All right, now whatever the value of omega we are being given in this particular question, and whatever velocity v is given, okay, what happens is, take any point. Let's suppose now the disk is already moving with a constant velocity v. So any point on the disk would have a tangential velocity vt and will also have a velocity in the x direction, which is or in the minus x direction, which is again the same v, because this is a rigid body. So all the points on this body would be moving with the same translational velocity, otherwise this body would fall apart, okay, by defying the condition of rigid body. So that is impossible. In that case, every point on the, including the center, every point on this particular disk would have two velocities. One is the same as the velocity that the entire disk is moving with, and the other one is its local tangential velocity, which you can, vt will be r times omega if you take this body at r, and this is vt, this is v. Okay, so that what will happen, that because of two velocities vt and v, this will have a net resultant velocity, which let us call this as v net. Okay, so it will have a resultant velocity. Now if it has a resultant velocity, we don't need the value of the resultant velocity, we just need to understand that this particular any point, if we take this point here, and we know that this is moving with some resultant velocity in a particular direction, no matter whatever the value of the resultant velocity is, there will be friction working just in the opposite sense, and that particular value of friction will have the maximum possible value for that particular point. Okay, now since in this case, we have to understand, since this condition is given, omega r is much greater than v. Why is it given? Is because, let us just say that at particular this point, let's just say that if we take this point here, this point is here, this particular point will have a tangential velocity vt in this direction, and it will have a velocity or translational velocity v in negative x or backwards, then the resultant will be Vt minus V or V minus Vt, whichever is larger. Okay. In this particular case, we know that Vt is omega times R. Okay. So as we keep increasing the value of R from 0 to R will be here. Okay, and the entire distance will be R. Then from 0 to R, somewhere there will be a point for which Vt, which is omega times R, will be equal to V. So that point basically will have the same speed rightwards and the same speed leftwards. That means the point will be momentarily at rest. Okay. If the point is momentarily at rest, no friction works there. Okay. But then from this particular part, we can understand that for some value of R, omega R will be equal to V. Okay. What if this small r is capital R? If we, instead of any general radius, if we use capital of R, okay, big R, then then it becomes omega times capital R, and it cannot be equal to V because it's given that this is going to be much greater than V. Okay, much greater than V. That means if we reduce, okay, for whatever value of R, the tangential velocity at that particular point equals to V, then if we apply, instead of writing V small, this particular V, we write omega times small r. So omega times capital R is much greater than omega times small r. That means capital R is much greater than small r. Okay, so basically this condition transforms to the other condition. Okay, that means the point where where the tangential velocity is equal and opposite to V is basically at a radial distance small r, okay, which is well within the periphery, and it is actually very close to the origin or the center. Okay, at that particular point, of course, that particular point will be at momentary rest. Okay, but then it will be much closer to the origin. That is basically what the this approximation is telling us. Okay, if omega r is much greater than r, this approximation condition is telling us. So r, the radius of the disk, is much greater than the radius of the point where tangential velocity is equal to v. That is all we have understood. Let us move on to the next part. Now I am going to, at this point, I am going to use the method of approximation to solve this problem. So I am basically wiping the board clean here. We have already understood the situation. Now how do we solve it? First of all, let us do some geometrical approximations, okay, and find some techniques. So I'm going to draw the figures, I'm going to use the black ink, and then for notes I'll be using the green ink. Now in this, okay, we understand that in this direction there is v constant, and omega r is much greater than v necessarily implies that r is much greater than r. That means if this is the center of the disk, then very close to let us denote the center as O. At a very close distance, there is another point which let us call this point as A. Okay, this particular distance OA is small r. Okay, this particular distance is smaller. Now this particular point is at momentary rest. Okay, that means we can take this particular point as the instantaneous center of rotation of the entire disk around what? The axis which is perpendicular to the plane of the floor, which is the board. So the axis which is perpendicular to the board and passing through this point A acts as the instantaneous axis of rotation, but this particular point A itself is the instantaneous center of rotation of the entire disk. You will say why? Okay, let us understand. Now we know that the center, when we had the problem, okay, when you used the disk in just moments ago, we understood that this entire disk is moving with V. Okay, that means the center is also moving with V. So the center is moving with V and the disk is rotating with omega. Okay, if we take this particular point as the instantaneous center of rotation, okay, then we know that if this is the center and point O is basically at a radial distance r up from the center, or not up exactly, at this particular position. Okay, so what happens, the tangential velocity with of the point O with respect to A, when we know that omega is an anti-clockwise sense, is going to be, this V is a Vt of O r times omega, or rather it's better to write as omega r. Okay, now what about this point? When the disk was moving with V, any velocity V, what was the velocity of this point? This point has Vt. If it was moving with omega, this was moving with Vt, which is omega times r, because this entire radius was r, and it was also moving V in the backward direction. The net velocity V net was, since we are already given that omega r is much greater than V, so it's going to be omega r minus V, and this we can write, this particular thing we can write as omega r minus omega times small r, because V is small r. We have already concluded that we have taken the point A in such a way that at this particular point the tangential velocity of this point is exactly equal to the velocity V, okay, but in opposite direction. So if for this particular point, let us just name this particular point as P. Okay, we call this point as P, which is at a radial distance r from O, but then this particular distance will be r minus small r. Okay, now for this particular point, the net velocity is omega times r minus r. We can just simplify it to omega as the common factor. So if we assume this particular point as the center of the momentary center of rotation, then we see that the point P is moving exactly as it should move had it been a pure rotation without any translation. Okay, now this point A is also moving in accordance with our with the concept that this particular point A is a point of momentary rotation, or the momentary center of rotation. And if you check this particular point just above, let's call this point Q. Now since it's moving with omega, this will have a tangential velocity Vt, and it will also have a velocity V. So the net sum V net, V plus Vt. What is Vt actually? In this case, what was Vt? Of course, it was moving with V, but then it was also moving with a tangential velocity Vt. What was this particular distance is r, so this is gonna, Vt was omega times r. So here the same case, instead of Vt we write as omega times r, but then this V is omega times small r. So if we take omega common, it is going to be r plus r. So this point has a net velocity now. At this particular instant, it appears to be there. If at that particular instant, we can say that this is basically a pure rotation in which it is moving with omega times r plus r, where if this is the center of rotation, then the entire thing starting from Q to A is R plus R. So we understand that this particular point works as our momentary center of rotation. Okay, and in this case we can just forget that the disk is even translating. If we do our estimations from the point A, then we can be sure that there is no translation with respect to the point A. Okay, there is no translation in that particular moment. Okay, now since this particular point of special interest, what we can do is, now you can understand that now the entire circle. Now another thing, if imagine the disk again. Okay, there is a center, okay, C, and the disk is moving with omega, okay, constant angular velocity, and no translation. In that case, when it moves on a floor of friction coefficient mu, of course there is something, some maybe a motor or something, I think an electric motor or something, or maybe someone is giving some sort of torque by hand manually. But then whatever torque is being given to this particular disk, it is counterbalancing the friction at every point. Okay, friction will be at every point will be working tangentially. If it is moving with omega, so each point is moving like that tangentially, and just opposite, in the opposite direction of the tangential velocity, there will be friction working in the opposite direction. Okay, okay, that means there is some sort of force. Okay, at every point there is friction force. But then, does the disk move on its own in any particular direction? No, it doesn't. Why not? Because all the frictions, okay, all the frictions, like in the polygon law, you have understood that if friction is like this in the entire circle, for example, if you take a particular circle from center O, this is O, from center O within the radius R, the friction basically will, the sum of all the friction forces would eventually cancel out, because any friction here will be cancelled by the friction at the point which is radially opposite to that particular point. Take any point on this disk. If you take this point, the friction is in this direction, but if you take the radially opposite point, that will be moving in just the opposite direction, so both the frictions would cancel each other. That means the net friction is zero. But then how does it happen? Only if the entire thing is a circle. Okay, so all the circles contained in a particular disk would also have the same situation. Okay, so friction, rotational friction would, all the tangential frictions at any particular radius r would cancel each other. Okay, but that has to be a circle for the symmetry to be applied, but we do not have that here. Okay, we don't have a perfect circle. If we take this particular point A as the momentary center of rotation, and there is no we just ignore V then. Okay, we don't need to have V. Just mention here that V, because if the entire disk is moving in the direction, in this particular direction, that the friction would definitely act in this direction. That would be the friction in the x direction. Okay, in the positive x. That means we need to find a force F in the x-axis, but in the negative direction. So this is going to be Fx, which acts in the negative x direction. Only if these two forces are balanced, the disk will be able to move with a constant velocity. That's something that we have to understand. But now, since we have taken the reference frame from O to point A, where A is the momentary center of rotation, in that case, in order to use the fact that for a symmetrical body, remove or maybe just a disk or a ring, whatever you take, whether you take a ring or a disk, if it is rotating with some constant omega around its center, then the friction, all the tangential frictions would cancel each other. But this, not all points are equidistant from me. This particular point, for example Q, is located at a distance r plus r, but point P is r minus r. If I take my coordinate axis and make A as my origin instead of O, what will happen is this particular point, this exact point at the level of it, this particular point would have a velocity in this direction. And what will be the value of this point? If we take this point, this is going to be R. Let us just call this point as PQ. Let's call this point as T. Okay. If I call this point as T, this particular point is at a radial distance R from O, but how much is AT? Definitely AT is basically square root of, in the triangle OAT, OAT, it is R squared minus R squared. Okay, that's the value of this particular point. So the velocity V here at tangential velocity Vt, then Vt is going to be omega times square root of R squared minus R squared. Similarly, that is the same thing, but in the opposite direction, it will have Vt, which will be minus, okay, this value will be the same, but the direction will be just the opposite. So if here the friction, whatever the value of friction is there, F, the opposite would be there. Okay, but what about this? Okay, these 2 points will cancel each other, but friction here cannot cancel the friction here, because this is moving with this particular point is moving with a higher speed. Okay, now from this point, what will cancel the friction here would be the point at R minus R from O upwards. Okay, here in the upper direction with respect to the board. Okay, now this point would have the exact opposite velocity, so there would be some sort of friction. Friction will act here like this and will act here like this. So now that means we can see that there is basically, if we draw a circle that touches a point P, okay, that means center at A and the radius is going to be R minus R. If you take the circle here, okay, then there are 2 circles now. One is the inner circle, one is the outer circle. So friction due to all the points within or on this circle, on or within the circle, would cancel each other out. Alright, but then only part that will not be balanced is because of this crescent shape. Okay, this particular part is something that we have to worry about, because this is where the frictions would, all the tangential frictions would not cancel each other. So let us wipe the board clean and redraw exactly this figure and see what's going on. Now I have enlarged our disk so that we can understand it clearly. Now look at this. This is the original disk. The center is at O. Okay. Now at A is our momentary center of rotation. Okay, as we discussed. Now just to recap and to repeat the same thing so that we can have a clear understanding. From O to our point P, the distance is basically R, but from A, this distance is R minus R. And if we draw a circle centered at A with a radius R minus R, the circle will be something like this. Okay, so at whatever the value of the velocity or tangential velocity at point, let's say that the disk is moving with omega. So at this point, this is the tangential velocity Vt at P. Okay, that means the friction would act in this direction. Let's just call the friction at P be in this particular direction. The value of Vtp doesn't matter. The fact that this is moving, this is sliding against the floor, means that there is a force at this point Fe, and the same force would be exactly in the diametrically opposite, or you could say the diametrically opposite point, as I said in the just a couple of minutes ago, I said it's a radially opposite. It's not radially opposite, it's diametrically opposite. So with the center at O, the point Q would also move with the whatever VTP is, it is going to move with the same tangential velocity VTQ. Okay, but then the value of the tangential velocity doesn't matter. The fact that it is sliding on the floor means that the friction is going to be in the opposite direction, FQ. Since these are just 2 points and there is no difference between points apart from their position, then FP would cancel FQ. That means take any point on or inside the circle centered at A and with the radius r minus r. What happens is, take any point and the friction at that particular point is being cancelled by the point which is diametrically opposite to it. Okay, that means in total we don't have to worry about the part of the disc contained in the inner circle, because net friction is 0 in any direction. That means the only points that we have to worry about are the points which are inside this crescent shaped area. These are the points you have to worry about. Now it is very difficult to calculate friction at any particular point, because we are only given that the normal reaction is N, and that normal reaction N, which is mg, is being distributed over the entire area of the disk, which is pi capital R squared, which is, so that becomes the pressure. Okay, normal pressure you could say. So if I take any small area, elemental differential area dA, if I call it dA, then the normal pressure at that particular point we already have. Okay, then the normal reaction and for that particular area dA is dN, which is mg by pi r squared times dA. So whatever the value of dA is, we'll calculate that next. But then the friction there will be a differential friction, not F. So far I've been using F to denote friction. That was wrong. That was just to show you the direction and sense of friction. But then the differential friction at that particular area, for example, if this dA is at a distance, let us say A is the center of rotation. Okay, if A is the center of rotation and the dA, let us not take dA at any point. Let us define the axis now. If this is the x-axis and this is the y-axis, then for that particular area, small area, differential area dA, that particular point would be having a tangential velocity Vt. Doesn't value how much the magnitude is. We know that the friction is going to work in just the opposite direction. Okay, if this particular angle is theta, we take dA at angle theta at any distance r. Okay, take any distance r. In this case we are not going to use r again, because r is okay. Let us just say that at any distance r, but we have taken r only in this sense. That means there will be a confusion, but then try to understand that this particular position vector, let us call it, let's say that let us call that this particular r, will fix it as RA. Okay, that is the value of RA. But what is RA? Omega times RA equals to V. Okay, that means RA is V upon omega. Okay, and we know that R is much greater than RA. Okay, so we have fixed this. Now this is constant, RA is constant. It just depends on two things, V which is given and omega which is given. But then any variable r, at any variable radius r or position vector r, then we take the angle theta for this particular area element dA. Then the friction will have two components, and this angle will also be theta, and this component is going to be dF sine theta, and this is dF cos theta. But then we know in our case, in our problem, that the entire disk is moving with v in the negative x direction. That means we only need to sum up the friction in the positive x direction. Okay, for all such DAs we have to sum up the horizontal component, not exactly horizontal because this entire board is horizontal, but this all the component x components of friction we have to sum up, so that we understand how much force we have to apply in just the opposite direction or in the negative x direction, so that the entire disk would move in the negative direction with the constant velocity v. This df cos theta would cancel each other. Okay, if this is df cos theta for this particular position at theta, if I take this dA, okay, at this particular position, and the same r, if I take the same r, and if this angle is theta, basically what is this angle, then this is pi minus theta. So in this case, this is going to move in this direction Vt, so the friction will be along in this direction df, and this angle is going to be theta, and this angle is going to be, this is going to be df cos theta, and this is df sin theta. So you understand that df sin theta, they both add up, while df cos theta is exactly balanced by the df cos theta at this particular point. Okay, the y components of frictions are getting cancelled out. Okay, so similarly, whatever point you take, you just take another point in the corresponding negative angle, or pi minus that angle, whatever angle. If this point has angle of alpha with respect to horizontal, you just take it here alpha, or if the entire angle pi minus alpha or pi plus alpha. So so this angle will be alpha, then this angle is going to be pi plus alpha. So here also, if it is moving like this, then the friction is going to be like this. The components will be this and this. Here the components will be this and this. The vertical components, the friction, but again this friction will be along in this direction df, and that will be the horizontal component. They also add up to the one direction, but the vertical components are getting cancelled out. The vertical components are getting cancelled out, only the horizontal components add up. Now there is one more thing to understand, that for the part which is above the line of above the x-axis, their horizontal components add up to towards the positive x direction, but for the part which is below x-axis, their horizontal components are adding up to the negative x-axis. But here you see this area becomes gradually narrowed down and becomes 0 at this particular point. So whatever the value of friction would be, that will be becoming less and less. So for the upper part, for this particular part, if I could use the red ink to show this particular part, if I take, we'll have a net x component in this direction, okay, and that will be df x, okay, for the upper part, and for this particular area which I will be using for blue ink, for this particular area from here to here, they will give us dfx for lower part. Okay, but then since this part is narrower than the upper part, okay, since the thickness, you can see the thickness is increasing, becomes maximum, then the thickness of this strip is decreasing down and becomes 0 here. So this dfx upper is greater than dfx lower, so whenever they counterbalance, some extra dfx would be left out towards the positive x-axis. Okay, but we don't have to worry about that part will be taken care of by calculus itself. That's the beauty of calculus. So now we have understood this basic part. Now but the problem is that in dA we have to calculate dA in such a way, we have to formulate dA, the differential area, in such a way that it becomes easy for us to get an expression that we can use as integral, okay, or rather you can get an integrand. That will be simple enough for us to do the math on. Okay, we just start now that in this step we are only trying to make the math simpler. Okay, we've understood the concept so far. Drawing the circle again, or the disc rather, call it disc. This point is O. Think that this is a circle, although it doesn't look like one. Imagine, use your imagination. The disc. Make some corrections here. Drawing the inner circle at point A. Okay. Now we need to understand two things. First, that this particular this in black is R, while from A this particular distance is R minus, or radius is R minus R. The radius of the outer circle is different than the radius of the inner circle, but we are going to use a lot of assumptions here, approximations, so that we can get a simple expression for our integration, so that we can integrate all the x components of friction, elemental or differential friction. Now let us just take again the x-axis at A, keeping A at the origin. If we define our coordinate system, we're going to use both rectangular coordinate system, so that we can get the rectangular coordinate system is only for translational purpose, but we'll use the polar coordinate system to integrate for our integration. Okay, because we're actually the area element is moving in a circle or circular curved path, we'll be using plane polar coordinate system for estimation of area. Okay, now let us just imagine, take this point. If you take this point, let me use this pointer in here. Okay, if I take this point and call this point, let's just say point B. Okay, now that will be two lines. If we draw two lines here from O to be OB, and we also draw AB with a green. Draw AB. This is the x-axis, this is the y-axis, right? If we draw this, what do we see? O to B. OB is basically R. What is OB? OB is R. OB is R. We see that. Okay. What is AB? Well, it's basically a little bit difficult to find it. So let us use some sort of approximations. Now, imagine that the given condition is R is much greater than R. So basically, if this small point, this is O and this is A, if I just take it like this in this direction, okay. So if this is B, then OB would approximately, okay, what happens is this is R and this particular OB is R. Okay, what about this particular part? So basically there are two things that we need to understand. First of all, if I draw this OB at O, if I draw a line which is parallel to OB at A, okay, in this case we can see that the angle with the x-axis, angle by AB is theta, and angle by OB is also approximately equal to theta. So we can say that this angle is theta and this approximate angle is also theta. That part is clear. Now draw a normal from O to AB. Let us just draw a normal here and call this point M. Okay, now think from B to O. Okay, now basically what I'm doing is, let me enlarge this. Let us just understand what is going on inside the triangle OAB. Okay, in this triangle I'm zooming it on. Now look at this. In this triangle, what we have done, we have drawn a perpendicular from O to AV and named the foot of the perpendicular M. Okay, the angle that OB makes with the horizontal is approximately the same as the angle made by AB with the horizontal. We call both the angles theta. If this particular angle is alpha, let us just say if this particular angle is alpha, and if I enlarge the R too much with respect to RA, if RA becomes smaller, then OM also becomes smaller. Okay, it's basic common sense in geometry. But then if R becomes very large with respect to OM, because RA is small with respect to R, that means OM is very small with respect to R. So cos of alpha, which we can define as cos of alpha, is MB divided by OB, MB divided by OB, which is the hypotenuse. Cos of alpha, it tends to what? Become 1, because alpha tends to 0. As R becomes much larger than RA, then OM, this particular distance OM, is also becomes very less than R. Okay, it becomes very less than R. So the ratio OB is basically R. That means MB upon OB, which is the alpha. This particular angle will be small. Okay, because you can say that OM by R is much less than 1, and OM by R is basically nothing but sine alpha, which is very less than 1 and almost becomes 0. And sine alpha becomes 0 when alpha is almost 0. But when alpha is almost 0, cos alpha becomes 1, tends to 1. That means MB by OB is approximately equal to, we can see that it's approximately equal to 1. That means MB is OB. That means MB, this part MB is approximately equal to R. Now that this is R and MB is R, then whatever the value is, we understand that MB is R. We understand that MB is approximately equal to R. This is the beginning of approximation. Now in this triangle AOM or OAM, in the triangle OM, in this triangle OAM, or rather I would make it large. This is the right angle, this is O, this is A, and this is M. Okay, now look at this. This angle we know as theta, but the entire angle is 90 degrees, so this angle is 90 minus theta. Since this angle is theta and this angle is 90 minus theta, this angle is definitely theta. Now OAM is a right angle triangle, correct? And if theta is our reference angle, then we can say that sine theta is AM upon OA. That means our AM is OA sine theta, which is OA. We have taken OA as RA, which is RA sine theta. But then we need to find AB. Okay, so AB is nothing but AM plus MB, and we found that AM is RA sine theta plus MB is approximately equal to R. So dropping the approximation sign here, I'm just writing that AB is R plus RA sine theta. That means AB is R plus RA sine theta. Okay, that means now we understand at what distance, if I take any point B on the outer circle at an angle theta with the horizontal, the distance of that point from A is going to be given by R plus RA sine theta. We already know that. Okay, that is really going to be very important when we define the elementary. So all we are doing right now is just trying to find an approximated but easier definition for dA, so we can integrate them. So this part is over. Now let us draw the figure again. It's become very cluttered. If I draw the figure again, drawing the outer circle with black, and the inner circle, okay, the outer circle has a center at O, the inner circle is at the center, this is RA, and the center is at A, and basically this particular green mark, if I draw it, this is R minus R, and in black, if I draw it like this is R. Okay. Now let us just say this is the horizontal level, not horizontal, I'm making the same mistake again and again. Okay, so this is y-axis. Remember that the entire board itself is on horizontal plane. So x and y axis. Okay, at a distance, let's suppose if I draw a line, let us just take two points on the outer circle, so that if I draw these points, draw the lines from A to these points, if I take these 2 points, let's call this point 1 and point 2. Okay, if I take these 2 points such that the angle between the lines drawn respectively to these points from center is d theta. It's a very small angle. It's a very small angle. So I can say this particular shaded part, we can call this part as dA. If that is dA, then how do you find dA? So for a very small part, this dA basically works as roughly like a rectangle. So this is the length, and this is the width of the rectangle. So how much is the length? So basically the entire AB, let's call this point as B. Okay, and this point as this point AB, this point is C, this point is D, and this point is F. Okay, if I call that, we understood that AB, how much is AB? Okay, we already have written it here, R plus RA sine theta, correct? And how much is AE? A is nothing but the radius of the inner circle. That means BE is AB minus AE to some then R plus RA sine theta minus of R minus R, which basically R plus RA sine theta minus R plus R, which is R plus RA sine theta. Oh, not it's R minus RA. Okay, this is not R, it's R minus RA. So basically R by RA. Why RA? Is because we are actually subtracting this particular distance RA from the capital R, so that we can get the radius. So basically minus RA. So it's RA plus RA sine theta. RA goes out as common factor, 1 plus sine theta. So this particular part, if I write in red, this is RA into 1 plus sine theta. Okay, now what about this part, DE? What is DE? So basically this is this particular distance is basically, this is the one part which is being described, this part is being described by the radius R minus RA when we revolve it by the angle d theta. So what is the length of the arc DE? The length of the arc DE, we can get, this one is R minus RA times d theta. So for this particular rectangle, this is RA times 1 plus sine theta, and for this particular, this is R minus RA d theta. So the area DA, rather if I want to use the green ink, if I write the area DA, I know that it's going to be RA into 1 plus sine theta multiplied by R minus RA d theta. I can also note that since R is much greater than RA, we can say that R minus RA is approximately equal to R itself, because RA is very small as compared to R. It's like subtracting 0.1 from 1000. Okay, 999.0000, 999.999999. Okay, so approximately equal to R. So this particular part reduces, then we can get a final expression for dA is RA times, or rather if I take this particular part as R only, so this is R times RA into 1 plus sine theta into d theta. Okay, so that part is now clear. We are now have obtained the value of dA, so we can write it as dA is R times RA into 1 plus sine theta times d theta. Okay, let us create some space. Now we have got the dA, the differential area. We can now know that if this particular area, okay, if this particular area is definitely is at a radial distance, whatever the radial distance is, this is the line of the radius. Okay, so this will have a velocity, tangential velocity in this direction. Okay, which makes angle theta with the vertical, because we are taking the particular line of radius at an angle theta. Let's say we have taken this particular radius, okay, at an angle theta. It's a very small strip, so basically the line ADC and the line AEB, they both can be taken as a single line which is at an angle theta with the horizontal. So the tangential component will also be at an angle theta with the vertical. Okay, that means the friction here, the dF, the elemental friction, would act just in the opposite direction of VT, making an angle theta with the vertical. In that case, the dFy is going to be dF cos theta, and dFx, horizontal component, is going to be dF sine theta. Okay, now for what is the value of dF? The dF is basically nothing but mu mg by pi r squared, which is the normal pressure or the frictional pressure, you can say, into the area. That will give us the frictional force. Force is basically pressure into area. Okay, so this is the friction pressure, and if we multiply it this way, the dA, what is the value of dA? R, or rather RA into 1 plus sine theta d theta. So that is going to be dF, but we don't need d. Okay, one more thing, the R cancels the power of R in the denominator, but we need dFx for that particular differential area, which is the mu mg by pi r into, okay, I can write RA here, no issues, it's a constant, and then 1 plus sine theta d theta. Okay, so if I integrate this, the only variable is theta, and the theta needs to vary from 0 all the way to 2 pi, then I'll get my answer. Okay, and this integration will take care of everything else. And all we need to do is to perform the integration. Now we are at the end stage here. That will give us the result. So that means the total friction force Fx is mu mg Ra upon pi r, okay, in the integration from 0 to 2 pi of who? 1 plus sine. Okay, one more thing. Here we have to dfx, we have to made a mistake. I have to multiply sine theta also. Okay, sine theta, d theta. Because again, for the x component, it has dfx is df sine theta. Okay, dfx is df sine theta. So you have to use 1 plus sine theta times sine theta. Okay, 1 plus sine theta into d theta. This integration is very simple. You just take sine theta into 1, so 0 to 2 pi sine theta d theta plus integration 0 to 2 pi sine squared theta d theta. This particular part becomes 0. Why? Because sine theta, when you integrate sine theta d theta, sine theta d theta is minus cos theta, and minus cos theta is the same at 0 as it is at 2 pi. So from whenever you apply the limits, it will be cancelled out, right? But then what about sine square theta, which is integration 0 to 2 pi sine squared theta d theta. Sine squared theta, we know that 1 minus 2 sine squared theta is cos 2 theta. That implies 1 minus cos 2 theta by 2 is our sine squared theta. Okay, so which is integration 0 to 2 pi 1 minus cos 2 theta divided by theta upon bar 2. I take the 2, 1 by 2 or half out of the integration since it's constant. Now 1 minus cos, I'll just resolve it into two parts. Okay, again, once again, half the common factor integration 0 to 2 pi times d theta minus integration 0 to 2 pi times cos 2 theta d theta. Okay, now if I integrate this, then it will be integration of d theta is theta from 2 pi to 0, which is 2 pi. Okay, minus cos 2 theta d theta. What is the value? It is basically the integration of cos 2 theta d theta is sine 2 theta by 2. Okay, because if you differentiate sine 2 theta by 2, you are going to get cos 2 theta, 2 twice of cos 2 theta. Then if I differentiate sine 2 theta by 2, then you are going to get 2 cos 2 theta by 2, which is cos 2 theta. So it's going to be sine 2 theta by 2 within the limit 0 to 2 pi. Okay, but then sine is 0. Sine 2 theta means if theta is 0, sine 0 is 0. If theta is 2 pi, sine 2 theta will be sine 4 pi, which is again 0. So both the you are basically, when you apply the limits, it will be 0 minus 0. So the entire thing becomes 0. And since half into 2 pi is simply pi, so the entire integration becomes pi. Okay. I have just calculated the integration only, not taken the other part. Okay, the constant part has already been always been taken out, so I just solved the integration. So we can write that fx is mu mg Ra by pi r times pi. Pi would cancel out from denominator numerator. You can write the answer like this, but then Ra is something that you I'm sorry, Ra is something that you defined. So the question, according to the data given in the parameters given in the question, this is only omega. You know that Ra is omega times Ra is V. That means Ra is V by omega. So you just replace Ra by V by omega. That's going to give you the answer. Okay, so that's one of the answers. That's just one part. But again, which is the approximation? We did it by approximation and we were able to solve this. But what if I don't want to use approximation, I want a general result. So what can I do? It's very simple actually to find the general result. Let us draw the figure again. For general case, you just take, like, don't worry, just take the x axis and y axis, okay, whatever direction it is. So if the disk is moving with velocity v, let us take this as y axis and this as x axis, okay. If the disk is moving translationally with velocity v, constant velocity v in the y direction, if that being the case, what happens is, if this is the origin O, which is the center of the disk, I'm not going to take any other center, only center at O. What will happen? At any distance r, or radius r, radial position r, if I take some dA, area element dA, small differential area, if I take dA and this is at an angle theta, what will happen? This dA is basically having two velocities. One is tangential velocity and it is also having a linear velocity v, translational velocity, okay. For translation I'll just write vt, okay. Then vt is v, so don't have to use any subscripts here. So basically vt and v. What is the angle? We know that vt is always perpendicular to the radius vector, okay. What about the v? This is always horizontal, so if this angle is theta, this is also theta, but then the net resultant is going to be here in this direction, which is v net. So whatever the direction of v net is, that is going to be the direction of df, okay. But then df will make an angle alpha with the vertical, where alpha is the angle that the v net makes with the vertical, or not vertical exactly, with the y axis, okay. So by the parallelogram law of vector addition, we know that alpha is, let us just do that again. If I just rotate it in 90 degree, this particular diagram, this is like, this is v, this is vt. So if I draw a parallel here with respect to vt, this is the net, v net, okay. So this angle is alpha, this angle is theta. So what is cos alpha? So basically I need df cos alpha. If this angle is alpha, I need df cos alpha, and this is going to be df sin alpha. And I am interested only in the summation of all the df cos alphas, because I just need the friction, that is only the total component of friction opposite to the direction of v, not perpendicular, okay. Eventually you will understand that these two components, the components along x for the friction, would add up to 0, okay. So I need the value of df cos alpha. I need to sum df cos alpha or integrate df cos alpha while varying r from 0 to capital R, which is the maximum radius, and then rotating this angle from 0 to 2 pi. That's all that I have to do. So if df cos alpha is my required component, and I need to understand what is alpha, okay. First of all, alpha. So if I define the alpha, okay, in cos terms or cos inverse terms, that will simplify my mathematical expression. So cos alpha, what is in this triangle? Cos alpha is this particular part is v, and this is vt cos theta. What is vt? At any distance r, this is rotating with omega. So okay, I'm only concerned with the tangential velocity, that is simply put omega times r. So cos alpha is basically the base, which is v plus vt cos theta divided by square root of the hypotenuse. The hypotenuse, whenever two vectors vt and v, if they make theta angle, if this is v net, what is the magnitude of v net? So v net, basically the mod of v net is square root of vt square plus v squared, or rather I would write v squared plus vt squared plus 2v times vt cos theta. Okay, so I'll simply write v squared plus vt squared plus 2v vt cos theta. That is the part of cos alpha, and we know the df. Okay, df cos alpha, that gives me the required component. But what is df? df is mu mg by pi r squared into dA, which is the friction pressure into the area, gives you friction force, right? But then you need to define dA for any spherical. If I'm defining, when I'm trying to integrate dA for in r and theta, like varying r and varying theta, I'm using two variables, r and theta. That means it's a circular polar coordinates or plane polar coordinates. So dA is defined as r times r dr d theta. So that's the definition of dA. So I put df as mu mg by pi r squared times r dr d theta. Again, I'm mentioning this method is not for you if you're giving IIT JEE or JEE Advanced, or if this question comes in of course in JEE Advanced you will not be asked subjective questions, but again if it's Olympiad that you are applying for, then this is not the method that you use. I'm just giving you the illustration, the general case, okay, just with a scientific the spirit of a scientist, okay, not as an engineer who tries to approximate things to get to a practical result. So here mu mg by pi square r dr d theta, that is df. Then you have to use cos alpha also. Okay, so df cos alpha is you multiply the entire thing with this particular thing. But then if you replace vt with, so it's v which is given, then vt is something we coined. So what is the value? R omega, or rather write r omega, or I always write omega r. So omega r cos theta divided by square root of v squared plus omega squared r squared cos squared theta, okay, the expression r squared omega squared r squared plus 2 vt is 2 omega v omega r times cos theta. So that's the value. You have to integrate this entire expression in order to get the friction force. Okay, so this is sin alpha. Again, if I take something, let me show here something that here also things would cancel out. We'll write the formula again, but first of all try to understand something very important. This is v, okay, this is the direction of v. Now if this angle is theta, if I take the dA at exactly the same the radial opposite or diametrically opposite point dA, if I take here, then at this point this is going to be the same omega r as it was there, but vt is going to be like this. This is the linear velocity v. So now the the alpha, okay, so what are the net is going to be somewhat like this. If you try to configure formulate the value of alpha, this, so if this is the direction of v net, this is the direction of df, and this angle is alpha, so this is again df cos alpha. So both the y components are adding up, while this is df sine alpha and this is df sine alpha. They are basically cancelling each other. Okay, so the y components will the x components will cancel out and the y components would add up. So you don't have to actually worry about the x components. All you have to do is to integrate only the y components. So now just the last step, because I can only state the expression, I can write the expression, but I will not be able to solve it or evaluate it analytically. So basically our force Fy, the value of the is basically the value of the applied force, or the magnitude of the applied force is the same as the magnitude of the sum of y components of friction, which is mu mg. We knew that, by pi r squared. Mu mg by pi r squared, that's the friction pressure, okay, times r dr d theta, which is the area, times cos alpha, and we define cos alpha as v plus omega r cos theta divided by square root of v squared plus omega squared r squared plus 2 v omega r cos theta. Okay, now this particular part is constant, so when you try to you have to double integrate it from 0 to r and 0 to 2 pi. Okay, so basically r would vary from 0 to r and theta will vary from 0 to 2 pi. So the better way to write that means f is integration, or rather I'll take the term mu mg by pi r squared, mu mg by pi r squared, integrating it from 0 to r, okay, into r dr, then integrating the other term, the theta term, from 0 to 2 pi, v plus omega r cos theta divided by this total of v square plus omega square r squared plus 2v omega r cos theta d theta. Okay, that's going to be your answer. But then this double integral is the double integration here. It's very hard, it's almost impossible. I think I even tried to run it on Mathematica to evaluate the double integral, this particular part only, and it took out of many attempts I had success only once or twice. That too, again, if you just use arbitrary parameters like v omega and capital R, okay, you don't need okay, yes, if you need this R, capital R, v omega as it is without assigning in numbers, I don't think you will be able to solve it on simply on Mathematica either. I haven't tried MATLAB, but again, this is I don't think this is solvable in analytical method. But yes, what I did is I took omega equals to 100 to capital R equals to 1, small r, rather omega r, again g, I took g as 10. What else do we need to take? Omega 100, v, again I took v is 1. It also matches because v omega r, which is 100, has to be much greater than v. Okay, in that case omega r, what do you say, that the approximation holds. Okay, omega r, which is 100, which is greater than 1, of course, and in that case RA, we know that the RA has to be very small, to R. What is RA? Omega RA, which is V, is omega RA, which is 1. Omega is 100. That means RA is 1 by 100, which is 0.01. 0.001 is very less when you compare it with 1. So with all these assumptions, okay, the formula that we initially got was what? F was mu mg by omega r. Isn't what we got there? Mu mg by omega r, because RA was there. Okay, we had RA. Okay, V was there. Okay, that was the formula that we got. Initial case, if we plug the values that I've taken here for our parameter, it's going to be mu m into 10 into 1 upon 100 into 1, which is basically mu m by 10. And when I did with the same set of values, when I plugged these values into this particular integration and ran it on Mathematica Wolfram, actually I got the value of the integration I got as pi by let me check, I think I got it as pi by, give me a minute, I'll attach the same photograph. I'll attach the same photograph at the end of the video so you can see it. But let me see. I got it as approximately pi by 100. So this particular double integration. So this particular double integration, when I computed, this gave me approximately as pi by 100. So outside you have again mu m, g is 10 we have taken, by pi times r squared. R is again 1, okay, times pi by 100. That gives mu m by 10. So you are also getting the same result. I'll attach the Wolfram as a proof of the evaluation of the double integral, which gave us approximately pi by 100. So this is the general expression. So this particular part is the general expression. General expression. I haven't used any kind of approximation to obtain this. No matter, it doesn't require that omega r has to be greater than v. It does not require that. Okay, so whatever the value of omega r and v, all the parameters are free to go. In that case, you can just use this particular formulation to get the answer, but you would need computers. Okay, you probably won't be able to do it analytically, not even by using numerical methods. It is going to take too much time. If you will be able to solve it using numerical methods on paper, but still it's going to be a waste of time. So use a computer. That's the expression that I have obtained. So now I have given you both the methods. One is the approximation, which is what the question wants us to use, and I also solved it the way I did it first time when I got it, because I usually don't care about approximations. I just want to find the general result, and only then I want to see how can I practically use some approximations. That'll be all. I hope you understand. If you still have any questions, I mention those in comments, or reach out to me at bib@thephysicist.in, or visit my site at thephysicist.in, and that'll be all. Thank you.